Hi, I'm Joshua Donhito,
And I'm Kaitlyn Payne.
and we'll be talking about gender roles and differences between men and women in art during the Renaissance period. Physical beauty and virtuousness. These characteristics are found in most of the depictions of women in Renaissance portraits. Although this was the norm, it's safe to assume that the normal Renaissance woman wasn't always so beautiful or virtuous. These were the idealized depictions of women that developed due to their apparent lower social status compared to men. On the other hand, men were portrayed with more of an emphasis in their masculinity, power, and social position as a man. From this, it can be inferred that art during the Renaissance reinforced the ideas of gender inequality between men and women. Women were portrayed differently than how they actually lived. In these paintings by Whedon, almost everything was symbolic or had a purpose for how it was depicted. Virtue is indicated through stiff, upright posture with the eyes gazed downward or averted. The position of the arms were also important. They needed to be close to the body. However, the portraits were not meant to focus on the subject, but it was meant to focus on the proper behavior of women of a certain class. In fact, the names of these women were unknown, but were meant to resemble Mary Magdalene, the mother of Jesus. The women are seen as passive, powerless objects, which affected everyday women greatly. The result of these depictions made it so that women should strive for a moral life, obedient, respectful, humble, true, and pious. On the next slide, we can see how men affected women's lives greatly. In this portrait by Lippi, a woman is seen being stared at by a man. This reinforces the idea of women being under control by those higher than them. Like Whedon's portraits in the last slide, symbolism plays a huge role in determining how a certain woman was during their time. She is seen wearing pearls, a sign of virginity, and brooches on her shoulders and head, gifts from her husband that signifies his ownership of her. In a double portrait by Van Eyck, the dog signifies eternal love and fidelity, and the numerous religious symbols scattered about the portrait signifies piety and religious devotion. All these different meanings and symbolisms that are depicted resulted in the reinforcement of a woman's place during the Renaissance period. They were subject to the overwhelming power of men and didn't carry even the littlest of rights. In the next slide, we'll be discussing how men were affected by the art that depicted them.
Women were portrayed differently than how they actually lived due to men being socially higher. They would look at a portrait of the idealized Renaissance woman and would want to emulate their characteristics. Men, on the other hand, already had power, and their portrayals in art reinforced this gender discrepancy between the two genders. Men were not idealized towards physical characteristics, but were idealized through the image of a man's position in the world. In these portraits of Albrecht Dürer and Henry VIII, you can see their power reflected in their posture and confident expressions. They both have gold words written beside their head to get the viewer to read across their eyes. In addition, the male subject during the Renaissance was often portrayed as their named saint. In the self-portrait of Dürer, he has painted himself to look like Christ. These paintings of men during the Renaissance demonstrated the importance of power for men. These paintings of the Portinaris may appear very similar to the paintings in the previous slides. These images seem quite repetitive because they both have a very similar religious composure, clothing, hand positions, and messages. It wasn't so important to know the names of those painted in the portrait as it was to focus on the proper behavior of the woman and the power of the men. The common man or woman living during the Renaissance would look at the depictions of their gender and would want to imitate them to fit into society. In the end, it can be seen that many of these paintings did not portray an accurate representation of the men and women that lived during this time. Instead, it demonstrated an idealized image that many normal people strived for.
Why is this important in our world today? It shows that the way people are represented in art has come a long way. Women and men are no longer bound to be their idealized self, and individualism can now be seen in all aspects of artwork today.
Thank you for listening.